The Zilani Republic had enjoyed 300 years of perfect peace. Their worlds were paradise, floating cities above crystal blue oceans, markets filled with goods from across the galaxy, and children who had never heard the sound of weapons. Fire. The Zilani were traders, not warriors. The ships carried exotic spices and rare minerals between star systems, not plasma cannons or missile arrays. Captain Valana of the Zilani Defense Corps often joked that her biggest challenge was keeping space pirates from stealing cargo containers, not fighting wars. Her fleet consisted of 12 aging frigates and a handful of patrol boats equipped with mining lasers that someone had optimistically labeled as defensive weapons. Most days, they served as glorified traffic controllers for merchant vessels. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when the sensors aboard Zilani Station 1 detected massive hyperspace distortions at the edge of their system. Captain? We're reading 50. No, 70 contacts emerging from hyperspace, reported Lieutenant Mortel, his voice climbing with panic. They're not responding to standard identification requests. The Korthok invasion fleet materialized like a nightmare made real. Massive. Battleships bristling with weapons, swarms of fighter craft, and transport vessels the size of small moons. Their hulls were black as space itself, decorated with red markings that looked disturbingly like claw marks. General Dex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Talon, surveying his prey through the viewscreen. The Korthok were conquerors by nature, a warrior species that had crushed 17 civilizations in the past century. To them, the Zilani looked like helpless children playing with toy boats. Begin the cleansing protocol, Dex ordered, his voice a harsh growl. Show them what happens to species that dare exist in our path. The Zilani Defense Corps fought bravely but hopelessly. Their mining lasers barely scratched the Korthok armor plating, while enemy plasma bolts tore through their hulls like paper. Captain Valana's flagship exploded in the first exchange, taking half her crew with her. The remaining ships scattered, desperately trying to buy time for civilian evacuations. Chancellor Vesa watched the battle from her command center deep beneath the planetary capital. Holographic displays showed colony after colony going dark as Korthok forces landed and began their systematic destruction. The invaders weren't just conquering, they were exterminating every Zilani they found. Madam Chancellor, we've lost contact with Zilani too, reported her aide, Commander Yelter. The outer colonies are completely overrun. Our defense fleet is gone. Vesa closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 3 billion lives on her shoulders. The Korthok would reach the inner worlds within days. Her people had no weapons that could stop them, no allies powerful enough to intervene, and nowhere to run. Open channels on all galactic frequencies, she commanded, her voice steady despite the desperation in her heart. Broadcast this message in every known language. The Zilani Republic faces complete annihilation. We offer our entire planetary treasury, 60 trillion credits, rare mineral rights, advanced medical technologies to any civilization willing to provide military assistance. Please. We have children here. The message raced across space at faster than light speeds, reaching monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Most ignored it completely. The Altarians were too busy with their own border disputes. The Federation Council would spend months debating whether intervention was legal. Mercenary groups calculated the odds and decided the Korthok were too strong to fight profitably. But 27 light-years away, aboard Terra Station 7, Captain Lee Dongmin heard something in that transmission that others missed. Monitoring deep space communications during the night shift, sipping synthetic coffee and half listening to the usual chatter of merchant, ships, and diplomatic messages, when Chancellor Vasa's voice crackled through the speakers, pleading for help in broken galactic standard, Lee sat up straight. He had a daughter about the same age as some of those Zilani children he'd seen in cultural exchange programs. The desperation in the Chancellor's voice reminded him of his wife calling for help when their home had caught fire years ago. Computer, analyze transmission. How many casualties are we looking at if no one responds? Lee asked. Based on historical Korthok invasion patterns, estimated casualties range from 2.8 to 3.2 billion beings within 72 hours. The AI responded matter-of-factly. Lee stared at the numbers for a long moment. 3 billion people. Entire families, entire worlds, wiped out while the galaxy watched and did nothing. He thought about his daughter sleeping safely in her bed back on Earth, and made a decision that would change galactic history. He tagged the transmission with the highest priority classification possible and sent it directly to Earth Command. With his personal recommendation, immediate response required. Genocide in progress. The message reached Admiral Park Jin-woo while he was having breakfast with his family. Park was a veteran of humanity's first contact wars, a man who had seen what happened when good people did nothing while evil flourished. He read Lee's report twice, then kissed his wife goodbye, and headed for the Defense Council chambers. The emergency session lasted exactly 47 minutes. Secretary Kim Sora, whose grandparents had survived Earth's darkest historical periods, spoke the words that would echo through the galaxy. Genocide is not acceptable under any circumstances. We have the power to stop this. Therefore, we have the responsibility to stop this. Admiral Park received his orders with grim satisfaction. The Third Fleet had been preparing for deep space operations anyway. Within 60 minutes, 200 of humanity's finest warships began their jump towards Alani space, carrying with them the full fury of a species that had learned never to stand by while innocents suffered. General Dex stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Iron Talon, watching the holographic display with cold satisfaction. Red markers showed Korthok forces spreading across the Zilani system like a disease. 3 outer colonies had already fallen completely silent, their populations eliminated according to standard Korthok doctrine. The remaining worlds would follow. Within days, the general was a veteran of 19 successful conquests. His scarred exoskeleton bore the marks of countless battles, and his forearms moved with practiced efficiency as he reviewed tactical reports. To the Korthok conquest was an art form, and Nex was considered a master artist. "Sir, the mining operations on Zilani 4 are proceeding ahead of schedule," reported Commander Zekroth, his second-in-command. "Full capacity. We estimate complete resource extraction within 6 months." Dex nodded approvingly. The Korthak didn't just conquer worlds, they consumed them entirely. Every useful mineral, every technological advancement, every able-bodied survivor would be absorbed into the Empire. What remained would be lifeless rock floating in space. "What about the homeworld?" Dex asked, gesturing toward the largest blue-green marble on the display. "Orbital bombardment platforms are in position. We can begin the final cleansing whenever." "You give the order, General. The Zilani leadership is hiding in underground bunkers, but our deep penetration bombs will reach them." Dex was about to respond when his communications officer, young Korthok named Veltok, interrupted with obvious nervousness. "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting incoming vessels at the system's edge." The general barely looked up from his tactical planning. In his experience, desperate civilizations often attracted scavengers and opportunists. Mercenaries, most likely. Some pathetic species hoping to profit from the chaos. "Many ships are we talking about?" Veltok's mandibles clicked together anxiously, a clear sign of distress among his species. "The readings are clear, General. The sensors are showing interference patterns I've never seen before." "Interference?" This finally turned his attention to the junior officer. "What kind of interference?" "It's like they're jamming our sensors just by existing, sir. The computer keeps trying to count the contacts, but the numbers keep changing. First it said 10 ships, then 50, then it stopped counting." General Dex strode over to the sensor station, his heavy footsteps echoing through the bridge. The display was indeed showing bizarre readings, energy signatures that didn't match. Any known species in the galactic database. Run a full diagnostic on the sensor array. This is obviously a malfunction. Meanwhile, far below on the surface of Zilani Prime, Chancellor Vesa huddled in the emergency command bunker with what remained of her government. The underground facility had been designed to withstand natural disasters, not military invasions. They had food for perhaps a week, power for slightly longer, and hope for considerably less. Madam Chancellor, Commander Yelter burst into the command center, his usually calm demeanor cracked with excitement. Our deep space monitoring station is detecting massive hyperspace distortions approaching the system. Someone answered our distress call. Bessa felt her heart leap with desperate hope. Who? How many ships? The readings are ... massive, ma'am. Larger than anything in our database. The hyperspace signatures are so strong they're creating gravitational anomalies. Around the bunker, surviving Zilani officials began to murmur with cautious optimism. Perhaps the Altarians finally decided to help, suggested Defense Minister Colleen. They have those new battle cruisers. Or maybe the Galactic Federation sent a proper task force, added another voice. They've been talking about intervention. Protocols for years. Yeltar shook his head, staring at the impossible readings on his portable scanner. Ma'am, with respect, this is beyond anything the Altarians or Federation could deploy. These energy signatures, they're like nothing I've ever seen. Above them, space itself began to ripple and tear. The hyperspace ruptures appeared simultaneously. Across a front stretching over 1,000 kilometers, a precision jump that should have been impossible for any known technology. The tiers in reality glowed with brilliant white light, and then something emerged that defied every tactical manual ever written. The third fleet of the Terran Defense Force materialized in perfect formation. 200 warships appeared as if summoned by some cosmic force, sleek destroyers that moved like silver sharks. Heavy cruisers bristling with weapon systems, carrier ships launching clouds of fighter craft, and at the center of it all, the massive dreadnought Soul's Might. Admiral Park Jin-woo stood on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by holographic displays that showed real-time positions of every vessel in both fleets. The human command systems had analyzed the entire Korthok force disposition in the seconds following their arrival, identifying targets, calculating firing solutions, and preparing battle plans within human speed. All ships, this is Admiral Park. His voice carried across the fleet's communication network with calm authority. We have confirmed genocide in progress. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Commence Operation Righteous Thunder. Show them what happens when they threaten the innocent. The response was immediate and devastating. Human ships moved with a coordination that seemed impossible, 200 vessels acting as a single organism. Fighter squadrons launched from carriers. Destroyers moved to flanking positions. And the heavy ships began charging their main guns. Back on the Iron Talon, General Vex stared at his tactical display in complete disbelief. The sensor readings had stabilized, but what they showed was beyond comprehension. His fleet of 70 ships, considered massive by galactic standards, was suddenly facing an enemy force nearly 3 times larger. It has to be a sensor malfunction, he muttered, his 4 hands trembling slightly. No species deploys such overwhelming force for strangers. No one fights like this. But even as he spoke, Dex knew the truth. The energy signatures were real. The ships were real. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrible realization was beginning to form. The Korthok had encountered many species in their conquests. Warriors, cowards, negotiators, and fanatics. But they had never encountered anything like this. Commander. Zekreth's voice cracked with panic. General, they're moving into attack formation. All ships are powering weapons. Sir, what are your orders? Dex looked at the display one more time, watching as the human fleet arranged itself with mathematical precision. For the first time in his military career, he faced an enemy that outnumbered, outgunned, and apparently outclassed his forces. Completely. The humans hadn't come to negotiate or make demands. They had come to fight. Signal the fleet, he said finally, his voice hollow. Prepare for battle, and may the Empire forgive us for what we're about to face. Captain Cho Minho gripped the handholds in his assault transport as it screamed through the Korthok defensive. Perimeter at impossible speeds. Round him, 47 Marines checked their weapons one final time. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were humanity's finest, trained for the worst scenarios imaginable. 60 seconds to drop zone.
Outed.
The pilot over the roar of engines and incoming fire. The transport shuddered as Korthok plasma bolts struck the hull. But the advanced armor held firm. Cho activated his helmet's communication system, his voice reaching every Marine in the assault wave. Listen up, people. Down there are 3 million. Zilani civilians trapped in their own cities. The Korthok are hunting them like animals. Our job is simple. Save every single one we can. Civilian casualties are completely unacceptable. Every blue life down there matters as much as our own. The transport bay doors slammed open, revealing the burning cityscape below. Sergeant Kim Yujin was the first to leap into the chaos. His powered armor's thrusters firing as he guided his descent toward a cluster of trapped civilians. Behind him, the rest of the squad followed like armored angels falling from the sky. The Korthok had expected traditional warfare, massive ships, trading fire in the void of space until one side retreated or died. They were prepared for orbital bombardments, defensive screens, perhaps even boarding actions. What they got instead was something completely outside their experience: human fighter craft. Didn't engage in heroic dogfights or try to prove individual pilot skill. They moved in perfect coordination like a school of deadly fish. Squadron leader Park Yun-soo led his 12 fighters in a sweeping attack that eliminated 6 Korthok anti-aircraft batteries in 30 seconds. No wasted shots, no unnecessary risks, just cold military efficiency. Dragon Squadron, this is base, crackled the radio. We're reading massive civilian concentrations in Grid 7-7. Korthok forces are moving to intercept. Copy that. Control. Dragons are inbound. Now the ground teams were clearing them a path. The fighters dove toward the city streets, their weapon systems targeting with surgical precision. Each plasma bolt eliminated a Korthok position while leaving the surrounding buildings untouched. The humans had studied the city layouts during their approach, identifying every school, hospital, and residential area that needed protection. Meanwhile, transport ships flickered in and out of visibility as their advanced stealth systems rendered them nearly invisible to Korthok sensors. These weren't just troop carriers. They were flying shadows that could deposit entire Marine units directly behind enemy lines without being detected. Lieutenant Han Soyoung materialized from her transport stealth field right in the middle of what had been Zilani Prime's main shopping district. The beautiful crystal spires she'd seen in cultural documentaries were now blackened ruins. Korthok's soldiers were systematically moving through the area, hunting for survivors. "Bravo, squad. Form up on me," she whispered into her comm system. Her 12 Marines appeared from various cover positions, their armor's adaptive camouflage making them nearly invisible against the rubble. Through her helmet's enhanced vision, Soyoung could see heat signatures of terrified Zilani families. Hiding in a collapsed building 2 blocks away, between her squad and the civilians, were at least 20 Korthok heavy infantry. Massive aliens and powered. Armor that made them look like walking tanks. Remember, we're using neural disruptors. Only, she reminded her team, these aliens are just following orders. Incapacitate, evacuate civilians, and move to the next target. Sergeant Bae-Taman spotted movement around the corner. Contact front. Multiple hostiles approaching the civilian shelter. The Korthok heavy infantry rounded the corner expecting to find cowering refugees. Instead, they found 12 humans in advanced combat armor who didn't even try to take cover. The Marines simply stood up and walked forward, their weapons firing continuously. Korthok plasma bolts that could melt through tank armor struck the human suits and dissipated harmlessly. The Marines' power armor was designed to absorb and redistribute energy from directed energy weapons. Each hit only made the suit's power cells stronger. "What are they?" screamed one of the Korthok soldiers in his native language as the humans kept advancing through what should have been lethal fire. The neural disruptors fired almost silently, sending precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulses that shut down the Korthok nervous systems without permanent damage. One by one, the alien soldiers collapsed, unconscious but alive. "Civilians secured," reported Corporal Lee Mai-noon as she helped a family of Zilani refugees out of the rubble. "We've got 12 adults and 6 children. They're scared but uninjured." Above the planet, the space battle was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The human fleet didn't engage in traditional ship-to-ship combat. Instead, they fought like a single massive organism with 200 different limbs. Admiral Park Jin-woo watched the tactical display from the bridge of the Soul's Might. His weapons officers were targeting individual Korthok positions on the planet's surface from orbit, something that required incredible precision to avoid hitting civilian areas. Sir, target acquired. Korthok Command Bunker, Grid 45 Alpha. No civilian structures within blast radius, reported Commander Songhai Jin. Fire when ready. Minimum necessary force only. The Dreadnought's main gun fired once. Single, precisely aimed plasma bolt struck the Korthok bunker from space, eliminating the enemy command structure while leaving the surrounding city block completely untouched. This wasn't how other species fought wars. The Altarians would have bombarded the entire area. The Federation would have negotiated for weeks while civilians died. The Korthok themselves would have simply destroyed everything and sorted out the survivors. Later, but humans fought differently. They fought to win, but they fought to win the right way. Every shot was calculated to minimize collateral damage. Every tactical decision prioritized civilian lives over military efficiency. They were willing to take greater risks to themselves if it meant saving innocent lives. Sir, reported the tactical officer, ground teams are reporting successful. Civilian evacuations in sectors 7 through 12. Enemy resistance is collapsing faster than projected. Admiral Park nodded grimly. The Korthok were learning what many human enemies had discovered. It's too late that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their absolute refusal to accept that innocent people had to die for military objectives. Signal. All ground units, Park commanded. Phase 2 is authorized. Begin systematic liberation of all occupied territories. Rules of engagement remain unchanged. Every civilian life is precious. The message spread through the human forces like wildfire. From orbit to the city streets, every human soldier understood. Their mission had evolved. They weren't just stopping a genocide anymore. We're liberating an entire civilization. One city block at a time. The war that was supposed to last months ended in exactly 72 hours and 14 minutes. General Vex sat in the detention cell aboard the human dreadnought Soul's Might, staring at the energy shackles around his 4 wrists. His once mighty invasion fleet was now either destroyed or captured. The survivors of his ground forces were being processed as prisoners of war, treated with a level of care that baffled him completely. Through the transparent aluminum walls of his cell, Dex could see human medical personnel treating wounded Korthok soldiers with the same attention they gave to their own injured. It made no sense. Korthok culture, captured enemies were either enslaved or executed. The concept of prisoner rights was completely alien to him. The door to the detention bay slid open with a soft hiss, and Admiral Park Jin-woo entered. The human commander looked tired but satisfied, his uniform showing the strain of 3 days of continuous combat operations. Carried a data pad and 2 cups of what appeared to be some kind of hot beverage. General Vex, Park said, offering one of the cups through the cell's service slot. I thought you might want something warm. It's coffee, a human stimulant drink, completely harmless to your species. Dex stared at the cup suspiciously. You're offering me ... refreshments? I am your prisoner, your enemy. You're a prisoner of war, Park corrected. It's under human military law. That means you're entitled to basic dignity and care. The war is over, General. There's no point in continued hostility. The Korthok general's mandibles clicked in confusion. Why? He demanded, his voice rising. Why did you deploy such overwhelming force? This was a minor territorial expansion, a few million primitives on the edge of civilized space. Why bring 200 ships to stop something so insignificant? Admiral Park's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. General, let me explain something about humans. We don't measure conflicts by the size of the territory involved. We measure them by the number of innocent lives at stake. But the cost? Dex protested. The fuel, the resources, the risk to your own forces. Ash. No rational species commits such massive resources for strangers. There are no minor territorial expansions when they involve genocide, General Park said quietly. 3 billion Zilani lives aren't insignificant to us. Every child, every family, every dreamer and artist and scientist in the system matters. That's not a weakness. It's what makes us human. Meanwhile, across the Zilani system, The aftermath of the human intervention was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Most conquering species would have simply left after defeating the invaders, perhaps demanding tribute or establishing military bases. The humans did something completely different. They stayed to help. Captain Osunjin stood in the ruins of Zalani Prime's main power distribution center, directing teams of human engineers and Zalani technicians working side by side. The facility had been nearly destroyed during the Korthok occupation, but the humans had brought specialized equipment specifically designed for rapid infrastructure restoration. The main reactor is back online, reported Engineer Park Sora, her coveralls stained with coolant and metal shavings. We've rerouted power through the backup grid. The residential sectors should have electricity within the hour. Excellent work, O replied, marking another item off his extensive checklist. What's the status on the water treatment plants? Teams 3 and 4 have the primary systems operational. The chemical filtration units needed some creative repairs, but Lieutenant Kong Daeho figured out how to adapt our equipment to their technology. Clean water should be flowing to all major population centers within 6 hours. Overhead, human medical frigates worked, alongside converted transport ships to deliver aid to remote areas still cut off from the main cities. Dr. Lee Soo-jin supervised triage operations at what had been a Korthok prison camp, treating both liberated Zalani civilians and captured Korthok soldiers with equal professional care. The Zalani here are suffering from malnutrition and psychological trauma, she reported to her superiors. But they're responding well to treatment. The Korthok prisoners have some combat injuries, but nothing life-threatening. Both groups will make full recoveries. The most remarkable aspect of the human relief effort was its scale and organization. They had arrived prepared not just for war, but for the complex aftermath of liberation. Engineering corps, medical teams, logistics specialists, and even cultural liaisons who had studied Zalani customs and language. 3 days after the last shot was fired, Chancellor Vesa finally emerged from her underground bunker. The city she expected to find in ruins was instead bustling with activity as human and Zalani crews worked together to repair the damage. The air smelled of ozone from welding torches and the distinctive scent of human ration packs being distributed to hungry civilians. A human Marine, Sergeant Kim Tae-young, approached her with a respectful bow, a gesture he had clearly learned from studying Zalani culture. Madam Chancellor, Admiral Park requests your presence aboard the Soul's Might at your earliest convenience. There are matters of mutual importance to discuss. The shuttle ride to the human flagship gave Vesa her first close look at the Third Fleet. The ships were unlike anything in her experience. Sleek, powerful, but somehow not threatening. They moved with purpose and precision, but without the aggressive posturing she had expected from a military force. Admiral Park met her in his ready room, space that managed to be both functional and comfortable. The walls displayed images of Earth, blue oceans, green continents, and cities that seemed to blend seamlessly with nature. Madam Chancellor, Park said, rising from his chair, I trust you, and your people are receiving adequate assistance. More than adequate, Admiral Vesa replied, still overwhelmed by the generosity she had witnessed. Your people have given us back our world. The Treasury I offered 60 trillion credits, mineral rights, our most advanced technologies. It's all yours, though I fear even that cannot repay what you've done for us. Admiral Park shook his head with a slight smile. Chancellor, we don't require your treasury. Earth's economy is more than capable of supporting this operation.
Now what?
We need is something far more valuable, partnership. Partnership? Vesa was confused. But we have nothing to offer you. We're not warriors. We have no great technologies or resources you couldn't obtain elsewhere. You have something we value more than any resource, Park explained. You have the potential to be friends. The Zalani Republic has a reputation for fairness, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. Those are exactly the qualities we need in this galaxy. I don't understand. You could have taken everything. Your fleet could conquer dozens of systems. Why settle for friendship? Park gestured toward the images of Earth on his walls. Because that's not who we are, Chancellor. Humans learned long ago that strength without purpose is meaningless. We don't want to rule the galaxy, we want to protect it. The Zilani Republic, restored and thriving, will be a beacon of hope for other peaceful species. That's worth far more than any treasure. The agreement they signed that day was unlike any treaty in galactic history. The humans asked for nothing beyond fuel costs and basing rights for emergency response. In return, they offered protection, technological assistance, and most importantly, friendship. As Admiral Park's shuttle returned him to his flagship, he looked out at the restored Zilani cities beginning to glow with electric light. The Third Fleet would remain for another week, ensuring the reconstruction was complete and the last Korthok holdouts were captured. But the real victory wasn't measured in ships destroyed or enemies defeated. It was measured in the 3 billion Zilani lives that would see another sunrise, and the message that would spread throughout the galaxy when humanity decided to help. They didn't just send aid, they sent hope. The news of humanity's intervention in the Zilani system spread across the galaxy faster than wildfire. Quantum-entangled communication networks carried the story to every corner of civilized space. Within hours, what had started as a minor territorial dispute on the galactic rim had become the most talked-about military action in centuries. On the crystal spires of New Altair, defense ministers gathered in emergency sessions, studying footage of the human fleet's precise coordination. The holographic displays showed 200 ships moving as one organism, each vessel perfectly synchronized with the others. Military analysts ran the battle simulations over and over, trying to understand how such overwhelming force had been deployed so quickly. They jumped their entire Third Fleet, whispered General Morgan to his aide. 200 capital ships, for a species they'd never met before. The logistics alone should have taken months to organize. In the gleaming halls of the Galactic Trade Assembly on Nexus Prime, representatives from 47 different species gathered for an emergency session. The massive chamber, designed to accommodate every type of alien physiology, buzzed with nervous energy as delegates debated the implications of humanity's actions. Ambassador Kong Dejin stood at the central podium, her simple blue uniform contrasting sharply with the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by other delegates. She had volunteered for this assignment, knowing that her words would shape galactic policy for generations to come. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. I know many of you have questions about humanity's response to the Zilani crisis. Allow me to make our position absolutely clear. The chamber fell silent. Even the usually chattering Vorthok delegations stopped their chittering to listen. Genocide is unacceptable, Kong continued, her words measured and precise. Wherever it occurs, whenever it occurs, humanity will respond with overwhelming force to protect innocent lives. This is not a threat or a political statement. It is simply who we are. The Altarian delegate, a tall, blue-skinned humanoid, stood to address her. Ambassador Kong, your species deployed massive military force for people you had never met, with no guarantee of payment or strategic benefit. This behavior is ... unprecedented. How do we know you won't use such force against us? Kong's response was immediate and unwavering. Because you're not committing genocide, Ambassador Veltar? The day you start systematically exterminating civilian populations is the day you need to worry about human intervention. Till then, we have no quarrel with you. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the Korthak Empire was discovering the true cost of their expansion policies. Emperor Krexel sat in his throne room aboard the massive fortress ship Eternal Dominion, staring at reports from 3 different star systems where human fleets had appeared to stop Korthok operations. Your Majesty, reported Admiral Zekmorth, his voice trembling with barely controlled fear. The humans have interfered with our expansion into the Bakari system. Full fleet, just like at Zilani. Our forces retreated rather than face complete annihilation. And the Mallory colonies? The Emperor asked, though he already knew the answer. The same, my lord. The moment our cleansing operations began, human ships appeared. They gave us exactly 1 warning before opening fire. Our commanders chose discretion over valor. Emperor. Krexel had ruled the Korthok Empire for 37 years, conquering 17 civilizations and enslaving countless billions. He was accustomed to being the most feared entity in any room. But the reports from his military commanders painted a picture of an enemy, unlike any he had ever faced. The humans didn't want territory or resources, didn't demand tribute or seek to establish dominance. They simply appeared wherever innocent. Civilians were being slaughtered and put an immediate stop to it. The efficiency was terrifying. "Open a channel to Earth Command," the Emperor ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "It's time to discuss terms." The surrender message that reached Admiral Chen Wei-Ming at Terra Station was unprecedented in galactic history. A major interstellar empire, one that had terrorized dozens of species, was offering complete capitulation rather than face continued human intervention on distant worlds throughout the galaxy. The story of the Zilani rescue became legend. In the rough cantinas of mining colonies, in the elegant salons of diplomatic stations, in the cramped quarters of merchant vessels, beings of every species whispered the same phrase: "Don't make them call the humans." Pirate Captain Stelvac learned this lesson the hard way when his raiders attacked a Zilani merchant convoy 6 months after the liberation. Within hours, human patrol ships had appeared out of nowhere, their weapons powered and ready. The pirates surrendered without firing a shot.
"How did they get here so fast?"
Stelvac asked as human marines processed his crew. "We have standing orders," replied Commander Park Manessio. "Any attack on Zilani vessels gets immediate response." "Pick the wrong target, Captain." The rehabilitation colony where General Vex and other Korthok prisoners were held became an unexpected source of intelligence about human nature. Unlike traditional prison camps, the facility was designed to help former enemy soldiers understand why their actions had been wrong and find new purposes in life. Vex spent his days working in the facility's gardens, growing food for both prisoners and guards. In the evenings, he wrote in his journal, trying to understand the species that had defeated his empire so completely. Day 127, he wrote carefully in his cell. Today, a human child visited the colony with her school class. She was perhaps 8 of their years old. When she saw me, she was not afraid. She asked me if I liked the flowers I was growing. I told her they were beautiful. She smiled and said her grandmother would be proud of the work I was doing. He paused, staring at the words on the page. "I have been a warrior for 43 years. I have conquered worlds and led armies. But this small human child showed me more honor in 5 minutes than I showed entire civilizations. They don't fight for glory or conquest. They fight because they believe it's right. That makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and perhaps the most necessary." 6 months after the Zilani liberation, Admiral Park Jin-woo stood in his dress uniform before the Terran Defense Council, submitting his final report as commander of the Third Fleet. The document was characteristically brief and precise. "Mission parameters. Prevent genocide," he read aloud. "Mission status accomplished. The Third Fleet stands ready for the next call. Respectfully submitted, Admiral Park Jin-woo, retiring." As he walked out of the council chambers for the last time, Park felt a deep satisfaction. The galaxy was a little safer, a little more just, because humans had chosen to act. His replacement, Admiral Kim Soo-jin, was already preparing for similar operations. The message was clear: humanity's commitment to protecting the innocent was not dependent on any single person or fleet in the Zilani Republic, now a proud founding member of the expanding Terran Alliance. Children grew up learning new songs and stories. They sang about the day the sky filled with silver ships, when angels in powered armor fell from heaven to save them from monsters. Chancellor Vasa, now in her 70s, often visited schools to tell the story personally. Remember, she would tell the young Zilani, they came not because we could pay them, but because it was right. That is the measure of true friends. The galaxy had learned a simple but profound truth. When humanity decided to help, they didn't send measured aid or calculate cost-benefit ratios. They didn't negotiate or hesitate or form committees to study the problem. They sent fleets. They sent overwhelming force guided by unwavering moral purpose. They sent the clear message that innocent lives mattered, no matter how distant or alien. And in a galaxy where it might usually made right, where the strong preyed upon the weak as a matter of course. That message resonated like a bell tolling across the stars. Evil could hide in the darkness between worlds, but it could never hide from humanity's righteous fury. The age of casual genocide was over. The humans had made sure of that. The end.